Hey, welcome back. Video 3. I know I've been promising to make shorter videos, and this time I will make good on that promise. We're not going to do a whole heck of a lot in Fusion in this video. What I'm going to go over is how to, now that we've got the rolling chassis developed in CAD, what we're going to do now is play around with that chassis, but in the field a little bit. It's nice in that FRC makes all the CAD models available for everything in the field. It's anything you could possibly imagine is on First website. And so here you can see charge station, the scoring, the human player stations, they're all there. Even to the point where you can download the entire field assembly, which is what you see in this kind of messed up view. It's messed up because my origin system and my coordinate system is different than what whoever did this CAD, I assume there's a bunch of people, whoever worked on this CAD, it's different than ours. So you can see here, a top view for us is actually a back view for them. It can get kind of messed up. And the other thing too is I've already downloaded this file and uploaded it. I saved that time in the video. So I've uploaded it to Fusion, and it was like a 60 meg file. You get too much of this stuff and Fusion can really bog down your machine. I got a pretty decent computer. It's old, but it's when we built it, it was really, really good. So what I've done is I've actually taken some of the most important elements that we're going to be concerned with is obviously the scoring stations, the cubes and the cones, and then also the human player. What I've done here is I've just made a very, very simplified file. Again, downloading the models from First, re-uploading them, and then I kind of arranged it all. So what I've done here is made a much, much lighter weight file, CAD model, that we can use our rolling chassis to interact with. So now that I've got these in, I'm gonna bring the chassis in. I'm just dragging and dropping our chassis. I'm not gonna save anything with this just yet because we're still messing around with it. So I've dragged and dropped this chassis, and if you remember, the direction that's going around in my head, and we're going to talk a lot more about that, about the design of this robot, was cube only, right? So we're going to drag this and just get it roughly positioned in front of the cone, or the cube, I'm sorry, the cube station, and then we'll just call it okay for the time being. I'm going to turn off the human players because for right now, we don't really care about the human players. And then I'm going to turn off the cone station. So now you get kind of a view of what our robot looks like relative to the cube shelves. Now we can change around our view. We might move this chassis a little bit closer. The other thing that will come out is you can kind of see that we're perfectly, the wheels of our sorter module are perfectly aligned with the ground plane here. So this is a really accurate representation of up and down for our robot. But you can kind of see this is what our robot's going to be looking like relative to the scoring stations. Now, if I turn off the scoring station, and I know there's a better name for it, I just call it the scoring station. And then I look into the human player. Now, the one thing that we had said we wanted to try and do, I got to turn the visibility. Okay. one thing we had said we wanted to try and do was see if we possibly could get cubes dropped to us straight out of the grid, straight out of the drop station. Now it's not going to line up with our robot because we got everything all side to side. But if I just look at it straight from the side view, you can see here we got a pretty good chance if we can get whatever our gripper or whatever our intake is going to be here in this general area, we got a pretty good shot at getting cubes as they drop down to us. Okay, so I wanted to get into a little bit about what the design that's rolling around in my head. And I'm basing that on 100% hindsight with this season. Week 5 just happened. The best robots and the best tactics have kind of risen to the top. And the one thing that sticks out in my mind, again, this is my first full year mentoring, so kind of new to analyzing a bunch of this, but the one thing that popped out in my mind with the top robots and the top teams, what they're doing is they're very, very efficient with their movement of the robot. And what I mean by that is there's very little wasted time on the field turning to get parts or turning to avoid traffic. The thing that I noticed a lot of, getting more descriptive, is there was very little turning going from the human player stations over to the scoring grid. A lot of robots, a lot of the good teams and good robots, they would obtain a part on the front of the robot and they would just traverse in one direction, no turning, and go to the scoring grid and score their part on the back side of the robot, so on the opposite side. The first robot that I saw, well, I was kind of paying attention, but was 1189. I forget the name, but 1189 was at a Wayne State event that my son was volunteering at, and they had a big, almost like a swing set type of thing where the arm would go up and get a part out of the front of the robot at the sliding table. It would drop it down to protect it and contain it as it traversed across the field. And then it would lift up the opposite direction and deposit that part, be it a cone or a cube, out of the backside of the robot. Another team that does it really, really well, our co-state champions from last year, was 2337 Engineers. The last team I want to make note of, granted they're one of the best teams in the state and have been for a while, is Team 67, the hot team. They went one step further in that they have their front of their robot is designed to obtain parts from the deli counter, the top shelf, but also on their right side of their robot is they have a low intake. And what that does is they can either go straight to the high counter and get a part off the high counter, or they can back up and get a part dropped to them from this station that's on the screen right now. And then they can use that also as a floor intake, and then they just go straight backwards to the scoring grid. So what that does is it minimizes the amount of maneuvering and thought process that a driver and an operator have to undertake in order to get their parts. So that's one thing I wanted to do with this is, and part of the struggle why I've been kind of noodling it over is, if we call this the intake side over here, actually we'll do this. Okay, so if we call this the intake side, and it's going to look something like this, how do we get the intake side flipped around so that I can score on these stations here. So again, if that's my intake, how do we go about flipping it around so that I can deposit low, medium, or high? Because remember, we're targeting to try and score high with this robot. So the things that I've been trying to figure out, and we'll get into it in the next video, is how do we flip this around? Is it a 4-bar linkage? Is it some sort of pivot mechanism? Is it just a raise and lower with a cylinder? We'll get into that. But for now, that's part of the challenge of this is, okay, if we want to target intake on one side and scoring on the other, we got to figure out a way to flip this intake around. Now, as far as the intake goes, again, we're working with hindsight being 2020. We know what works, we know what doesn't. So in the next video, we'll get into that. We'll probably just stick with the intake. And then as far as the design, how big picture wise, how do you go about designing this is, okay, you've got we'll get through the intake in the next video. Then it's how do we figure out what mechanism do we use to try and flip this around? So more to come on that. So I just kind of wanted to give you an overview of, in this video, how we go about messing around with the field. I wouldn't be worried too much about actually working within the field, but how to go about working with simplified scoring grids and human player stations. So again, shorter video this time. Hope you appreciate it.